Welcome to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm-Up Sessions podcast. As always, let's dive into some batchy. Yeah.
Nice. A friend of mine sent me a photo of this coffee that they purchased it. They asked me if I tried it. I said, not
This
yet.
one? Is it Anthony?
It was Anthony.
Nice.
Did Anthony send you a DM too?
Yeah.
Nice.
It's like I finally got my hands on it. I was like, lovely.
Why are all these batch brews lukewarm? What's going on?
I don't know. Sometimes they're okay. They're not always this lukewarm.
This is like, if I had a thermometer, I would guess about 120. It was brewed like a minute ago. I wonder if the water temp actually in the brew head is low.
Could be, but it's saying, I think it's set to like over
206?
like 205 or something, yeah. Which is pretty hot for a batch brewer. I don't think many batch brewers can. Most batch brewers are doing like 200?
I mean, if you're talking about like
home.
yeah, like all the SCA like star batch brews, whatever, they have to brew at a certain temperature, and I think it's hotter than 200.
Okay.
So, but maybe like a Mr. Coffee for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's fine. It's not fantastic, but I think it has something to do with the temp. That's what I'm not liking.
Could be, actually.
Just kind of.
Actually, it could be.
It's not like.
It's valid.
I'm not using like roasting terms when I say this.
Yeah.
But it's dull and muted. Like it's like, but it's soft. The mouthfeel is very soft on it. It's very silky. It feels dialed, but I know these coffees decently well, and they're always punchy.
Yeah.
But not on this brew. So I'm gonna blame all of this on not such a great batch brew.
Yeah, that's fair. Which one was that?
I believe that was the Las Perlitas honey.
It's the honey. Okay. This is Prodigal's Las Perlitas honey. I just had some leftover.
Roasted November 12th.
So it's nicely roasted.
According to Scott's recommendation, it's rested.
Yeah, I've brewed this a handful of times on filter, and it's way more like jammy, fruity,
Lively.
kind of taste almost borderline like a natural. That's how punchy it is. So yeah, this definitely doesn't do this gem justice.
Yeah.
It might be a temp thing.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
I have a feeling it is.
But it's like it's not always doing that. It's like whenever it wants to.
Yeah. I mean, could be that I just plugged it in, press start. I don't. That shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, that should. Yeah,
I have no idea.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. Pretty okay batch brew.
Mediocre.
But
Can't be mad.
Nothing to be concerned about. Nothing to lose your life over.
It's not my first cup of the day, so you know.
That's true.
Yeah.
If it was the first, I mean, you might be a little cranky about it.
It's like when you send out the bad wine towards the end of the party.
Yeah. Oh man, yes. Wonderful. Well, not to. Also, for those of you wondering, we did go scope out some eagles.
Yes.
The conditions were a little rough.
Mm-hmm.
Not as rough as last year.
Was it last year that
or the year before that?
Yeah.
Where it was like a blizzard out there.
That was great.
Yeah.
So I think that was last year.
Yeah. So this year, a few little eagles perched on the branches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old sir was still perched above the roasting, above the brewing spot.
The brewing.
Dude, he was there. He
Yeah.
was guiding the brew along.
Lovely.
This time straight out of the trunk. That was not bad.
Yeah. It was okay. It was
Yeah.
okay. It was just downpour, raining, wet.
So bad.
So it was a little crunchy, but other than that, it was good. But yeah, we don't want to extend this holiday season and keep, but it's also the season for like New Year's, the holidays, all this stuff. But today, I know last year we did kind of like a year in review. Today, honestly, I thought, man, what if we Also, I'm going to preface that with saying we're stepping into year 4 of Mirror, which is insane. Honestly, it's, I don't know. It feels surreal. Like time just flew by.
I mean, is it stepping into year 4 or we've done year 4? Because we've done all of 2020. We've done all of 2021.
Right. So
we've
I
done
guess
all of 2022. We've done all of 2023. Are we stepping into year 5? How does that work?
I guess, yeah, that is weird.
Yeah.
No. I guess we,
Yeah.
I guess we've
been operating for 4 years.
You'd be in 4 and stepping onto 5.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. That's even scarier.
Yeah.
So a few years doing this thing, which is awesome. Again, I would, feels like I never really expected it, but at the same time, it was like, well, what else do you expect? What's plan B?
Yeah. If you're making coffee brown, you're doing the thing.
Yeah. And so we just wanted to look back at, this year and specifically and just ask ourselves, like, what did we learn in coffee?
Yeah.
Because not only is coffee evolving as an industry, but I think the more experience, but also like smaller experiences that you have, you're just gaining in perspective. You're getting better, whether that's, your 5th year competing or your 1st year competing.
Right.
Every single time you're just getting the reps in. And I think a lot of anything what you want to be good at, whether you're playing, pickleball or whatever it is, it's like you just need to get the reps in, build that muscle memory, build that, just muscle memory.
Yeah.
Not just going through the motions, but really getting into it. So, and we've been doing this for 4 years, but also you've worked in coffee before that a little bit. So have I, less than you. And so I feel like also, that all being said, I'm almost done with my rant here, but that all being said, I feel like the more that you're into it, feels like some people just stop learning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With experience, it's just
themselves. Right.
Yeah. Maybe that's more like you just don't necessarily think to challenge yourself because you have things kind of set in place. So, I don't know.
I think the big thing is what you said in this preface is the fact that there's this tension of making sure that one. I totally kind of lost my thought, but I'm kind of still there. But the tension,
the headphones threw Sergi off.
Yeah. No, the tension between doing things on repeat, like going through the motions, right, and at the same time making sure that you're doing a new thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's not a balance. Like I specifically use the word tension because you have to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. You have to put in the reps. You have to keep doing bench press if you want your chest to grow, but you might want to add some more weight. So the repetition is doing that same workout, but the new thing is you're adding more weight. And I think after 4 years, we've added so much more weight into what we do, but we've done the same thing over and over again. And that's a very important thing to understand, to distinguish when one, you look back, and then when you look forward, because looking forward, we don't know what's going to happen in 2024. But what we do know is that year after year, that experience increased because of the things that we did on repeat. And that was a big thing this year. It was a hard year in general for coffee. It wasn't easy our economy didn't make things easy. A lot of things happened, which we'll talk probably in future episodes. But the reality is, like, we kept roasting coffee. We kept buying green coffee. We kept figuring out, okay, how do we move this coffee? And it wasn't all smooth. It wasn't all easy. Yeah. But the thing is, we kept doing it. And what's encouraging is looking back at our last quarter and looking at our numbers, like we exploded in the last quarter when a lot of my friends were struggling with just cafes and roasteries and struggling to bring in the revenue. We actually did pretty good. Yeah. And to me, that is a big testament towards just doing the same thing over again. But my point that I wanted to bring on, like the main thing that I learned is I'm still learning the same thing over and over again, which is in the coffee business in general, like, serving guests. The key is being a people person. Like you can't outdo just being a good business person. And I know you can follow up with this and say the opposite. I know that because we've talked about this.
No,
but
you're
you
spot
can't,
on. I mean,
you can't outdo the business side by just crunching numbers. Like you have to be a people person. And whatever you're doing with your business, however you want to grow it, there's strategy, there's marketing, there's all those things. But the reality is you're marketing for people, not towards people, but for people, right? Yeah. And the goal is that you're able to serve people well, whether that's a cafe or a roasting company. Yeah. And that's one thing that's like, because some of my highlights throughout the year were some of the new importing companies that we brought on. Again, we talked about this in the last episode, our time at SCA, hanging out with our people, like with the good people. And then across the board with the importing companies, also like going back into competition and then seeing how important the people are that you're competing with, like all of those things. You competed for the first time. So stuff like that reassured me, like, I gotta continue to invest in the concept of what people are around me, who's around me, and how do I serve people. The business side, that's also part of it, but that's anchored in that.
Yeah, 100%. I would totally agree. I think that's probably why there's certain people placed in certain roles to make sure that doesn't go overlooked. Yeah. And something I'm also noticing in, for example, like this is just kind of more business side a little bit, but in corporate, just a lot of corporate brands are struggling right now with this concept of being relatable and being relevant in today's culture, because a lot of them have become so big and so monstrous, and they have these things that they stick to, these guidelines for, their brand or their look or how they communicate. But culture has already progressed so much. Like we've seen, change in all kinds of things, whether that's music, fashion, art in general. So many things have shifted over the last, 5-6 years. The expansion of TikTok, new ways to communicate. And yeah, I think that's a really big difficulty for a lot of them to be able to say, how do we actually be people focused again, instead of just going in the motions of business. Let's just move stuff, put stuff on a shelf. Yeah. But how do we actually become more people focused? So, I have no objections. I think that's very true.
Yeah. Another thing, hearing you say that, like, there's also a difference between being quote unquote people focused, like we shoot, right? Like you're taking it and you're like focusing on your subject and you're putting that subject in focus so that you can take a photo and it looks crispy and sharp, right? But that's much different than being people centric. Right. And I think the key is being people centric. Yes. Not just people focused. Because people focused, again, can become this project where you need that person that you're focusing on to buy your stuff. Yeah. But people centric is like, you're like present with, you're both the person who sells, but you're also the person who purchases. Yeah. You're on both sides of the, I guess, coin, for lack of better words. Yeah. So you're people centric instead of just people focused. And that's a big deal. I mean, let's talk about producers, you know what I mean? Your conversation with Jorge, my experience in Indonesia with coffee farmers, and realizing that, again, it's not enough to just be focused on origin. Like you have to center your vision around the concept of what happens at origin. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that's very well said. I think midway through what I was saying, I was like, man, how do I put that into words? But that's what I was in the back of my mind that I was trying to put words to. So, that's solid. I think for me personally, the biggest learning experience for this year in coffee has been, I know this word got really overused during COVID, and I hate it. But I just, the lack of better term is being able to adjust to
pivot.
Yeah, I don't want to say that word. That word's so dumb. Like,
dude,
everybody
pivot.
and their mom was
Three in the
pivoting. I don't
key,
know.
my guy.
Like,
Pivot.
Yeah. But for me, I think this year was a lot of pivoting and adjusting and learning how to do that, and learning how to kind of based off of that, concept of putting in the reps, but being able to add on a little bit of weight when you need to, so that you can adjust, so that you can get better, so that you can learn, as opposed to simply just doing it and that's it, And so for me, I think like everything from, our release of the new bags, the new boxes was, that took up like those first 2-3 months, that first quarter. And then of course, like our adjustment to cupping with different water.
Yep.
That was like, okay, so we're going to make another adjustment. We're going to need to make another change. But then as soon as we changed our water that we're cupping with, our roasts naturally started to also get adjusted a little bit. And that was also another interesting, like, okay, so we kind of had this, let's say like a style, not to say that we've changed a lot, but they're kind of like micro adjustments that we've done in our roasting that we taste because we're cupping these, all the time. We're always drinking our coffees. If somebody, might have bought a couple bags, they're like, oh, it's kind of, as I remember them, but for us, just like cupping with different water and then having that adjusting our roast accordingly to bring out different things in our coffees. And then on top of that was adjusting to, different, sourcing coffees from different people that we've sourced. And I think we've sourced some, some tasty bangers this year, which I'm pretty stoked about, which is getting me excited for this upcoming year as well. But just seeing that progression through the year was like cool. There was just a lot of these like adjusting, learning experiences, figuring things out, and what felt like net positive growth. And
totally.
For me, I mean, being 4 years in and still having net positive growth, and for the better, I mean, that's what got me pumped.
Especially looking at this last quarter, like there's a lot of things that happened that I personally did not expect, and like things came through, especially in a time when we all know the economy is not great. Buyer's confidence is super low. Like I have those conversations with guests in the cafe all the time. So like I'm fully aware, we're fully aware that this is a tough time to run a business, but putting in the reps, like you got to do it. And even if there's a little more weight on those reps, like you don't lose your form. Like you keep pushing. You keep holding on to your form. You don't sacrifice form just to push more weight. Like that's never good. That's when injuries happen. That's when you do stupid stuff, and then all of a sudden you can't put in the reps because you lost your form. So holding on to that form and being able to push through the weight and not over leveraging yourself, but not giving up and not stopping is like so crucial. And it's such a fine line, because at the end of the day, it's tough. It's stressful. It's it can be a headache. You have to figure out how to be able to say yes and no. You have to make decisions continually, and then you also have to have vision, because you're still looking towards the new year, and you're like, okay, what are we gonna do based off of this last quarter, or what are we gonna do after? I'm thinking about our Indonesian coffees right now. Like, what are we going to do? Like, how much more Indonesian coffee are we going to buy based on last year's numbers? Right. And then how much coffee can that producer give us this year? Right. Like, can they give us more, or they don't have any coffees for us? And if they don't have any coffees for us, are we still going to have an Indonesian coffee? Right. You know, so asking all of those questions and putting in the reps into the new year and trying to carry more weight, there's a lot going on in there, and I think you just have to keep going, keep moving.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and on top of that, I hope, even though I think that for me, that pivoting and learning and adjusting, that I felt like we've had like kind of for most of the just fine-tuning fine-tuning everything that we're doing, and kind of getting into a groove, which. The other thing I wanted to mention, This is just a little side rant, but before there was a time when we talked a lot about staying in your own lane.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that on the way here.
And man, as I was thinking about today's episode, that kept coming up, and I was like, I wouldn't be wrong if that was also pretty iconic for this year for us, because at least for me, it was becoming more confident and more, I guess, just rooted on everything that took 4 years to build, or I guess this, including this year, 3, 4, whatever. And realizing like, oh no, there's something here. It's finally kind of settled down to where we got things going. And now it's just like staying in your lane, adjusting, and kind of, you're almost like sinking into your roast process, sinking into your sourcing, sinking into kind of like how you present yourself, what kind of coffees, you're serving, how you're going to serve them, how you're going to talk about them. Like a lot of these things, and it felt like, okay, we're sitting in there. I don't even know how to explain it. It's better if you watch this podcast, you'll see. So
I also, part of like sticking in your own lane is recognizing other lanes. And making sure that that there's other lanes and that's okay.
Yes.
Like, you don't have to drive, or you don't have to stick into someone else's lane just because it's available. Like, you don't have to. You can always merge, like, for sure, but you want to make sure that you stick in your own lane, because that's the best and safest way. That's the way that goes the farthest, is your lane. And I think part of that is also, it's been an exciting year to look at what other people are doing in the industry. We've talked a lot about, Kyle and September and all of the coffees that September Coffee has brought on, like, and watching Kyle stick in his own lane.
Yeah. Right.
And then also not being like, oh, we should, also, like, I don't know, buy a Loring. I don't know, because Kyle did.
Yeah.
Like, that's cool. That's exciting. Great. And we do this.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, where it's like, you acknowledge other people's progress, you acknowledge their lane, and you keep crushing in yours. And sometimes it's inspiring to see that. Like,
for sure.
For at least for me, it's like, I mean, the classic of, if you're driving on the interstate and you see a car that may be your dream car, it's like, oh, dope, sick, but you're not merging into that car's lane to cut it off. I mean, it's a stupid example, but you see my point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like stuff like that I think is also inspiring about this year, because I've seen a lot of people crush it. I've seen a lot of my friends just I don't know, I feel like go 10x, in certain areas of life, and then in certain areas of business. And it's super inspiring. And then I've also seen myself being like, oh, this changed in my life, and now I'm doing this, or now I'm focusing more on this, and that's great. But I'm still doing the thing. That hasn't changed.
And realizing, to this lane analogy, it's just like, there's a little bit of everything. Like, we've seen roasters and cafes go the wrong way, where things got much more difficult, and if not closed, even in our small little town, which always is like kind of a bummer to see. And so it's realizing that, actually sticking in your own lane actually leads to a lot of sustainability, actually, for long term. When you can kind of find that and not be swayed left to right, and realize that there's room for everybody. Your job is to perfect your craft. Your job is to get good at what you're doing. Your job is to make sure you're doing it to the best of your ability. There's not much more that you could actually do.
Right. Yeah.
And so
there's no complaints at the end if you just continue doing that. Yeah. It's cool. I love this conversation, because like all of it has like that major through line. You come in and you make sure that you're putting in the reps, make sure you're people-centric, and all of that keeps you in your own lane. And I think that's an awesome thing, like, to look back at 2023 and to be like, okay, if I had to sum up a few key themes, it would be that, like, staying in your own lane means that you have to be people-centric. That's our lane, and then making sure that we're not only putting in the reps of the same old, but we're adding on, and we're seeing the weight increase because we're getting stronger. So it's cool. That's like, those are big things. That's not like, oh, all of a sudden we started roasting, 6-pound batches. We were roasting 8-pound batches. That's something we learned in 2023. Yeah. Like, it's not that simple. It's much bigger, which is great. Like, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, 100%. And not to say that, those things are invaluable, but I think some of these core things that are not, it's not like, I don't know. It's not like a batch size number.
Yeah.
But it's more like, oh no, these are just underlining structural main core parts that you have to nail down, because it doesn't matter if you're roasting 10-pound batches or 6.
Yeah, totally.
At the end of the day, it's like, frick, if your coffee tastes good.
Yeah, totally.
That's all that matters. So,
good stuff.
Right on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you for listening to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm Sessions podcast. Hopefully you guys have a wonderful new year, because I think New Year happens after a few days after this podcast airs.
Yep.
So, hooray. Hurrah.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah. There it is, folks. Remember, reflect what's good.